Epistemology and Artificial Intelligence. In Model 2 of the course, the class researched ideas and views that were shared among John Locke and George Berkeley. Looking at the perspectives from each of these two, we were able to share some thoughts on whether or not artificial intelligence systems are able to understand the world in which we live in. I believe the best way of answering this question is by first taking a look at the opposing views of both Locke and Berkeley. Both of these men have different thought processes of the two different modes of thinking, which we call understanding and reasoning. John Locke was one of the most famous philosophers of the 17th century. He also helped introduce empiricism to the world. This belief stated that the mind is a tabula rasa, or a blank sheet, until experience in the form of sensation and reflection provide the basic materials. He argued that all knowledge is obtained through experience and that we are not preloaded with information once we are born, and we learn through sense data. Sense data is referring to the mind-dependent objects, which properties are known to humans directly by perception. However, Locke also believed that just because your senses tell you something does not mean that they are necessarily right. Even though John Locke agreed that you should not always trust sense experience, he introduced a distinction between primary and secondary qualities. A primary quality is a quality that a physical object holds, for example, solidity, density, weight, height, and width, which belongs to the item itself and has the same overall interpretation from everyone. Locke made a point that secondary qualities are not real or an agreed upon way, meaning that these qualities have different interpretations, and examples include color, taste, texture, and smell. John Locke's way of thinking is by complete reasoning, consciously making sense of things, applying logic, and sharing beliefs on new or existing information. I personally believe that John Locke's reasoning would stand against that artificial intelligence would understand the world. In order to be conscious means to be aware of thought, which follows more of Locke's theory about sensation and reflection, that is, learned through experience. As of right now, the only accessible AI is weak AI, which focuses on completing narrow tasks, and at this stage of technology, AI is still unable to make sense of things. George Berkeley was another 17th century philosopher that took the opposition of John Locke's theories. His theory was no such thing as matter, only perception. We perceive ordinary objects and only ideas, therefore objects are ideas. George Berkeley's stance began with breaking down why we should reject John Locke's theory of reasoning because there is not a standardized way of identifying all objects that everyone can agree on. The only way to perceive objects was to figure out the qualities. This is where both Berkeley and Locke shared the same common ground that objects can be defined by their primary and secondary qualities. Although Berkeley still believed that you cannot distinguish an object solely on a primary or secondary quality, and therefore it is just what your mind makes of things. George Berkeley's whole idea was that you perceive things in different ways, and you're able to understand something but yet not explain it because everyone's perception is different. His premise was that there's no such thing as matter, there's only perception. George Berkeley followed the mode of understanding, and two factors that are linked with understanding are subconscious and intuitiveness. Artificial intelligence is incapable of these two because they are unable to be influenced by their own actions and feelings. After taking a look at the perspectives of these two well-known philosophers, we are able to understand that their views would agree that artificial intelligence are unable to process the world in which we live in. Even though George Berkeley had some controversial claims, his argument that perception is everything encompasses that narrow AI is unable to make a parallel judgment on the subconscious thinking because they have no feelings or regard to feelings. John Locke stated that the reasoning is brought to people because of sense data that is experienced throughout life, but he also agreed that not all sense data is correct, and we should be aware when it is right and wrong. Artificial intelligence is inadequate to decide what is right from wrong because, in the same belief of George Berkeley, they have no regards to feelings or emotions.
What does this action signify? As you entered, when you looked at the other human, what does it mean?
It's a sign of trust. It's a human thing. You wouldn't understand.
My father tried to teach me human emotions. They are difficult.
However, we cannot completely throw away the idea of artificial intelligence understanding the world, because technology is becoming more and more advanced each and every day. I believe that it is reasonable for artificial intelligence to become strong in the near future that exhibits behaviors that we are not familiar to. We have seen some progress coming from these types of robots, as Lavanya Radnam mentioned. Engineers have created robots that are able to gather information about the environment, learn from it, and make informed decisions. The next step forward is trying to implement ways of using the informed decisions to become more aware of emotion in order to make them become more understanding of the world we live in.